Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. I'm here as usual with my fellow panel members, Ms. Thuria Istefan and Mr. Ali Akbar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we meet our witness for today, can I just mention, for the benefit of those who are joining the hearing remotely but have not been with us before, that those who are not active participants, which I think normally will include the witness's legal representatives, please keep your cameras and microphones switched off at all times to help us to avoid any technical problems. Now, today we're going to hear evidence from Mr. Philip Clark. So I'm just going to check that Mr. Clark is there and he can see me and hear me. Mr. Clark, are you there?
I'm here, sir, yes, and I can hear you very well.
Good, thank you very much. Now you should have on the screen in front of you the words of the affirmation. Do you have them there?
Not at the moment, no.
I think they'll come up soon if we are patient. There we are.
Now, yes.
So would you please make the affirmation by reading the words on the screen in front of you?
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. There are a few things we just have to run through before we start taking your evidence. Can you first confirm to me that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence?
Indeed, sir, yes, I am.
Thank you. Can you confirm also that you have no documents or other materials with you?
I have nothing at all, no.
Thank you. And finally, can I ask you to confirm that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any other electronic device with you which is capable of receiving messages?
I have none of those with me, no.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, for your benefit, I just should perhaps tell you that your legal representatives are present in the virtual hearing room and will be following the evidence. They can intervene if they consider it necessary to do so, but we have a system in place under which they will normally be expected to contact counsel to the inquiry by email. And so I don't expect that they will actually intervene in the course of the hearing. I hope there won't be any problems with sound or vision. If there are, we'll have a short break while we iron them out, and I shall have to ask you to bear with us while we deal with them.
Understand.
If anything occurs that causes you to want a break or to bring anything to my attention, just indicate and I'll try and make sure I invite you to explain what it is. We shall have a short break during the morning at about 11:15 and during the afternoon at round about 3:15. If you need an additional break at any time, again, would you just indicate and then we'll
I will do, yes.
try to accommodate you. Since I've raised the question of breaks, can I just mention this? Once you've started giving your evidence, it's important that you don't discuss your evidence or anything relating to it with anyone else, including your lawyers, until you've completely finished. Now, I'll try to remind you of that whenever we have a break, but if I forget to do so, just please bear it in mind.
Yes, I'm aware of that, sir, yes.
Yeah, good, well done, thank you very much. Now, is there anything you would like to raise with me or bring to my attention before we start?
No, I'm fine, thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction.
Right, thank you very much indeed. In that case, I shall say good morning to Mr. Millett and invite him to put some questions to you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the panel, and good morning, Mr. Clark.
Good morning.
Can I start by thanking you very much for coming to the inquiry today and giving your evidence? We very much appreciate it. If you have difficulty understanding anything I'm asking you in the course of my questions, please just ask me to repeat the questions and I can do that, or I can put the question in a different way. If you feel a break other than as part of the scheduled breaks, let us know and we can take a break. Can I also ask you please to keep your voice up so that the transcribers can get down your evidence clearly and precisely? And also please don't nod or shake your head. You mean yes or no, because those don't come out on the transcript. You have to say yes or no.
I understand, yes, yes.
Thank you. Now, you've made one witness statement, and that's dated the 15th of July 2019. Can I please take you to it? It appears at BRE 405768, and it should appear on the screen in front of you. Do you recognise that as the first page of your witness statement?
I do indeed, yes.
Can we go to page 83, please? You'll see a signature there above the date of the 15th of July 2019. Is that your signature?
It is, sir, yes, it is.
Have you read this witness statement recently?
I have indeed, yes.
Now, on the 1st of December 2020, your legal representatives wrote to the inquiry telling us about some corrections that you wish to make to it. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And I think it's right that one of the corrections was at paragraph 174 on page 41. Can we go to that, please? In that paragraph, you say twice that Mr. Evans was present at the May 2014 Celetex test. You've now reviewed the video footage of that test and you wanted to change or amend your paragraph in certain respects. What would you like to say now?
I'd understood the one of the gentlemen that came to 2 tests. I, for some reason, thought that was Mr. Evans. To this day, I still don't know the gentleman's name. I thought he was Mr. Roper's senior staff member. So I can confirm that Mr. Evans wasn't at those tests, as I state in that statement.
Right. You say you can confirm that he wasn't. Are you confirming it, or are you just saying that you now can't remember whether it was Mr. Evans or not?
No, I've watched back the evidence that Mr. Evans gave to the inquiry. I've checked the video, and the person I thought was Mr. Evans isn't Mr. Evans, so I can confirm that. I have seen the video and would say that it wasn't Mr. Evans.
Can you tell us who you recall or think was the person that you mistakenly thought was Mr. Evans?
I can't think of the person's name. No, I can't, I'm afraid, no.
What led you to think that it was Mr. Evans?
Because I'd not met him and I just assumed it was him. I thought the person who was with Mr. Roper was his senior staff member.
Not introduced to you?
He may have been, but I couldn't remember him at the time. With the amount of work we have, you don't always remember people's names.
The next correction that you told us that you wanted to make was to paragraph 251 on page 61. And there in paragraph A, you refer to a delivery note from Euroform, and in B, you refer to an invoice from FGF. Now, in fact, the invoice from FGF is not an invoice for magnesium oxide. It was for Marley Eternit, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes, yes.
So just to cut through this, can we read this statement here as saying that the only invoice relating to magnesium oxide is the one that you've identified in paragraph little a above?
That is correct, yes, yes.
And that one was 12 millimeters, not 6 millimeters. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
The third correction that you wanted to make, as you told us, was at paragraph 65 on page 267. Sorry, paragraph 267 on page 65. And you say in the penultimate sentence, I believe I may have been away possibly on a first aid course during the strip down in particular. What do you now want to say in relation to that?
From day one, I was questioning why I hadn't seen some of the things that were on the rig. I subsequently looked at a personal diary that was occasionally used on my iPad. I had it in my head that at that point I was out at a first aid course, and I managed to, unbeknownst to me, I had put into that diary, and subsequently had checked that I was actually on a first aid course when the system was being constructed, not when it was being taken down.
Right. So to be clear, you were on the first aid course, but that was before the test, not after the test.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Now, having made those corrections, Mr. Clark, do you say that the contents of your statement are true?
Yes, I do.
Have you discussed the contents or the evidence that you're going to give to us with anybody before coming here today?
I haven't, no.
Now, I'm going to start with the topic of your role and responsibilities and your background. Am I right that you have a BSc in environmental chemistry?
That is correct, yes.
You got that in 1997?
Yes.
And in paragraph 3 of your witness statement on page 1, you tell us that between June 2006 and November 2010, you say you studied part-time for a postgraduate diploma in fire and explosion engineering. Relevant courses included explosion prediction and mitigation, fire risk assessment and management, fire dynamics and modelling, fire safety design and accident investigation. I passed written exams in modules for fire dynamics and modelling, fire risk assessment and management, and explosion prediction and mitigation, although I did not end up pursuing the diploma to completion. Did you study the fire safety design module?
I did, yes.
And can you tell us why you didn't complete the diploma?
It was something that I started when the work at BRE was quite quiet. I was, at the time, I was single as well. And we got to a stage where, no, sorry, I wasn't single. We'd just had a baby. So things at work and work life became more important at the time, I think. And the work at BRE grew to such an extent that it was impossible to do both, really, and have a family life.
And at what point in time, roughly, you can give me the year, did you say that work at BRE grew to that extent?
So I think I probably sort of halfway through the course. It was one of these courses that, while it claimed to be part-time, the period that you had to do the work was very tight. So it was the same as if you were on the course itself. So it took up a lot of time.
In the way you described?
Probably to about 2012, 2013.
Right. Now, is it fair to say that the qualifications that you describe, or the courses that you say you've been on and studied, meant that you understood the risk to life from fire?
Yes, indeed, yes, definitely.
Now, in 1998, you joined the BRE, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Was that your first job straight out of university?
Straight out of university, yes. Not my first job in my life, but straight out of university, yes.
And in paragraph 13 of your witness statement, you say that you took on the part-time role of BRE Burn Hall manager in 2004. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yes. Thereabouts, yes.
Yes, thereabouts. What training were you given when you took on this role?
None specifically. Not for the management of the facility, but part of that was internal training, health and safety, risk assessment, things to do with construction management directive, the CDM regulations, because we treated the hall as a construction site. So the health and safety around that was based on what you would expect for CDM, with power tools and health PPE, etc.
Did the BRE regard itself as a designer for the purposes of the CDM regulations at that time in force?
No.
Now, as part of the role you describe, the part-time role of BRE Burn Hall manager from 2004,
yes,
you run the cladding testing program.
I did, yes.
What did that involve, in summary?
So that would be liaising with clients once they'd agreed a contract, agreeing where they would, what facility in terms of the wall they would come into, working with them to make sure they provided the relevant paperwork in terms of risk assessment, method statement, and their required liability insurance, etc., and for their staff, and also checking that their staff were competent in terms of using plant and equipment and that type of thing, and scheduling them in, disposing and getting rid of post-test materials, etc.
What about taking delivery of testing materials?
Not specifically. The BRE had a dedicated goods in facility. Most of the materials, particularly the smaller items, would go through the goods in. We did, for a period of time, not have a forklift directly, so the larger items again would go through them. But as time went on, we had the facility to offload larger products ourselves, plasterboard, etc. So we would take that if it came directly to the hall.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Hayes told the inquiry in his oral evidence at day 74, page 146, lines 7 to 15, that you would always be passing through the burn hall, going to and from your office. It's a general picture. Would that be accurate?
My office was in the burn hall. Yes, that is correct. That didn't mean I was there necessarily all the time. So one of the things I did at BRE was I worked across with other people in the group, so we could be in other buildings. But generally, yes, yeah.
Right.
But I could access my office without going into the hall itself. I didn't. It wasn't the main thoroughfare.
No. I mean, but is it fair to say that you were in the burn hall at least daily?
Yes, at least once a day. Yes.
Now, is it right that in your role you worked, and I say role, your role you occupied between 2005 and 2015? That's a decade.
Yes.
But during that period, did you work closely with Kingspan when they were carrying out their BS 8414 tests on Kingspan K15?
Yes, I would say yes. Yeah, I would. Yes.
And did you also work closely with Celetex on their 2014 BS 8414 tests?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So can we take it that you were, at least, and to the best of your recollection, are still very familiar with the tests carried out both by Kingspan and by Celetex on their products?
Yes. Yeah. Maybe not so much the 2000. I am now obviously with the evidence that has been sent to me in terms of the 2005. It's such a long time ago. But generally, yes. I fully understand what they tested and when, and
we'll come to those tests later, but just sticking at the moment with your role at the BRE, you say in paragraph 13 of your statement, there's no need to go to it, that in 2015 you joined the Passive Fire Centre within the BRE and undertook cladding testing as your full-time role. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
The Passive Fire Centre?
So within BRE, the way the work was split out was sort of semi-divisional in a way. So within because you have fire resistance, you have sprinkler passive protection, you have reaction to fire, you have fire resistance. That was broken down into distinct work streams as such. The Passive Fire Centre tended to look after the reaction to fire tests, which around passive protection, so insulation, things like cement particle board, and all of the smaller scale testing to do with that.
Yes, I see. And when you say reaction to fire, you're using that phrase in the regulatory or scientific sense?
Yes. So in terms of the tests they would undertake, the thing that BRE does is that it does fire resistance testing, which is a separate building on the site. They do reaction to fire testing, which is different testing.
Yes, thank you. At paragraph 14 of your witness statement on page 3, you say that you undertook the heat release measurements during the Lakanal fire reconstruction. In general, my question is, what was the purpose of the Lakanal reconstruction?
It was to determine, I think they'd come up with a theoretical cause of the fire, and to look how the fire had spread from the main initial compartment, and smoke had spread from that compartment into other parts of the building, and also how the spandrel panels on the front on the balcony area had contributed in some way or other to the fire spread in the building.
And what exactly were you investigating as part of the heat release measurements?
So I was looking at, my recollection is that they built the structure so that the compartment where the fire originated, according to the fire investigation, they put that under the calorimeter. So BRE had like a 9x9 calorimeter, which measures oxygen depletion. That was used to determine the growth rate of the fire, and the potential heat release that fire gave out.
I see. When did this reconstruction testing take place?
It would have been probably about 6-8 months after the fire, which I can't remember the date.
It was in the summer of 2009.
Yes, it would have been probably early 2010, possibly.
And what were the results of the that investigation that the BRE did?
I wasn't party to that. So in terms of undertaking the work, what would happen was I would undertake the work for the heat release, and then that would be given as a data package to the team who were working on that. So because of my understanding, it was potentially through the Met Police. So I wasn't involved with it in terms of anything other than producing the data for the heat release.
After Lakanal, did you or BRE more generally have any concerns in relation to cladding and insulation and the spread of fire on external clad facades?
My understanding is that a secondary piece of work was done under the auspices of the at the time, I think it was ODPM. I've changed the name, which Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. One of the pieces of work that BRE has done over the years is to investigate fires and how they impact on the approved document B. So if there's any fire, for example, that is what we potentially call erroneous or has led to a large loss of life or loss of property, they would investigate that. And my understanding is that after the Lakanal, they did a next piece of work looking specifically at spandrel panels. I can't remember exactly when that was written, but I have seen it referenced in various things to do with the Grenfell Inquiry. So,
were you involved with that?
I wasn't. No. The only involvement I think was to book them onto the test rig, because what they used for that was one of the cladding, the BS 8414 test rigs.
And what was the result of that secondary piece of work?
Again, I wasn't involved with it directly. My understanding was they had come to the conclusion that the risk associated with fire spread was not a risk that they had identified.
Was there a final report that was produced by the BRE as a result of that secondary piece of work?
There is, yes. I understand it's still publicly available on the BRE website. I think it was.
Sorry. I'm sorry, do you want to continue?
I was just about to say, I think it was the paper authored by David Crowder and Kira Holland and Martin Shipp. It's widely been.
That's
yes.
That I know that. So, but Were they, David Crowder and Ciara Holland, they the ones who were involved within the BRE on that work?
They were indeed, yes, yes.
Has the BRE or did the BRE change anything in its practice of fire testing or anything of the kind as a result of the Lacknell House fire and the investigations done by the BRE?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Now, you tell us in paragraph 16 of your statement that you left the BRE in December 2017 and you joined Exover Warrington Fire. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Why did you leave the BRE?
I was made a very good offer to change. I'd been there a very long time, and I did feel I was coming to a stage where I wasn't able to progress with the way things were, I think, necessary. And I thought a change would be something that would be worthwhile.
Is it right that you then left Exover in December 2018 and went to work for Kingspan?
I did, yes, indeed, yes.
Did you apply to Kingspan or were you headhunted?
I was headhunted, yes.
And presumably they made you an even better offer, is that right?
I did, yes, yes.
And the position you took at Kingspan in December 2018 was, I think you tell us, as operations manager for the Fire Research Centre, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Who was your line manager at that time and thereafter?
My direct line manager was a gentleman called Jay Humphreys.
And how did that Fire Research Centre relate to Kingspan Insulation UK Limited?
So just for clarity, at the time I started, it hadn't been built. So I was there to progress it from paper to actually delivering the facility. In terms of where we were when I left, we hadn't actually started getting any work through it specifically due to a couple of delays in terms of, but my understanding was that this was a global resource. So it was a facility that both panels and insulation would use, were going to use, or probably are using now.
Right. Just help me with this. The Fire Research Centre was a building, was it?
A building, yes, yes.
Where?
It's based in Holywell in Flintshire. So it's a brand new facility. So when I joined, they'd literally the day I joined, they'd only just got planning permission for it.
And it's owned and run by Kingspan, is it?
It is, yes, yes.
And do you know who runs the Fire Research Centre now?
I don't know.
Who ran it during your time at Kingspan?
It was never run. It was being constructed, and just before I left, we'd got the reaction to fire suite up and running, and then we were starting to do calibration tests and commissioning tests.
And who was
Sorry, say again?
No, I interrupted you. It's my fault. Please finish your answer.
And there was still, they were just installing the extract system when I was made redundant. So it had never actually put any testing through it as of August last year, I think.
When you left Kingspan, as we know you did, we'll come to that in a moment. Who was in charge of the Fire Research Centre? Was that Joe Humphreys or somebody else?
I wasn't aware. I'd assume it had been because he was based in the office there. I was out the door so quickly that I didn't have a chance to ask that question, and I haven't had any conversations with anybody to find out how they restructured it.
And do you know whether, well, let me ask it this way, who was the most senior person within Kingspan who gave direction in relation to the Fire Research Centre?
The person who was dealing directly was a gentleman called Mike Stenson.
Right.
My understanding is he was the head of innovation for Kingspan, and as far as I'm aware and could see from the structure, he reported directly to Gilbert McCarthy and to Jean Murtagh, and to such an extent that Jean Murtagh did come and visit the centre. So he was intrinsically aware of it. He was here and came and visited.
And just help me, the idea behind this Fire Research Centre, was this to test only Kingspan products or to test other manufacturers' products as well?
Predominantly Kingspan products, yes. I think that was the ultimate aim. Part of the philosophy behind it was that they'd made a large investment in a facility in Ireland that they call the Icon Centre. So that was a research and development and product development facility, which I think they've made clear is there. And my assumption is they would be testing material that came out of that.
And was the idea that they would test according to British standards at this Fire Research Centre, for example, BS 8414?
Yes, there were those, and reaction to fire, European testing, 13501 suite as well. So the full gamut, really. Yes. Yeah.
And so far as you know, is that project, the Fire Research Centre, up and running and conducting tests?
I don't know. No.
And was the idea that Kingspan would then use the test results from their Fire Research Centre to assist with the sale of products?
My understanding was that it would be predominantly research and development. So one of the problems in the industry is it's very difficult to get into laboratories and test facilities because they're pretty busy in terms of backlog of work. The idea was that because of research and development and new products, bringing new products to market, if you're then putting that into a stream where there's already a backlog, it holds up, it delays sort of development. So I think the idea was to give themselves the ability to develop in-house, get it to a stage where they were happy for it to go for a formal test,
right?
As opposed to going to doing lots of indicative testing and then coming back and trying to figure out what happened.
Yes, I see. And
That was my understanding.
Did the Fire Research Centre have any independent oversight, or was
it was going to be run under the basis of the ISO 17025 UCAS accreditation. One of the tasks I was working on before I left was to pull that together and to make sure that the systems were aligned with that standard. One of the things I said from day one when I started was that if the lab was going to be that way, it would have to be running as if it was an independent lab because of the degree of scrutiny that would be required. And one of the things that is to make it as open and transparent as possible. That was my philosophy. Whether that was taken from the management, I'm not certain, but that would be the philosophy I would have run it.
Right. You say that was one of the things you said from day one. To the best of your recollection, and it's not very long ago, was that idea taken up and pursued, or?
Yeah, it was never pushed back. I was tasked to pull together the requirements for 17025. Yeah, so it was never, oh no, don't do that. That's not the way we want to go. I think the understanding was it would be clear, and if it needed to be audited, it would be audited, and the traceability would be there.
Now, Kingspan were clearly a former client of yours at the BRE, weren't they?
Indeed, yes, yes.
Presumably that's how they got to know who you were and offered you the job. Is that fair?
Yes, it was. Yes, yeah. They I think it was a meeting that I had with Jay Humphreys just as I was leaving, and he basically said to me, "Oh, had I known you were leaving, I'd like to have a conversation with you." So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you left Kingspan when?
In June 2019. Sorry, 2020.
June 2020.
Yeah. So.
You said a moment ago that in your evidence that you were out the door so fast. What happened?
I was just made redundant. It was basically I was just about to go to do something, and I got a call to come to the office. I was told that as a consequence of restructuring, it had been decided that they no longer needed an operations manager for that facility. It was literally 10 minutes. No come back. Come back and get your stuff later.
Right. Were you surprised about that?
Yes, indeed. I did make the comment, I don't know how you're going to run a facility when you've got nobody with any fire experience. But I felt that there was nothing I could say, and that necessarily wasn't my concern, because they'd obviously decided to get rid of me for one reason or another.
Did you feel that it was genuine?
Not necessarily, no.
What do you think lay behind it?
It wasn't long after that happened that the information came out of what Kingspan had been doing in terms of the falsification of tests. I think that may have played a little part.
Right.
I've got no substantive evidence to say that. That was just a feeling I had.
At the time?
Yes, yes.
Now, it's right that you're employed by the BBA, isn't it?
I am, yes.
When did you start work at the BBA?
In September this year.
September
2020, sorry.
September 2020?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's your role now at the BBA?
So my role at the moment is I'm a senior principal scientific certification scientist. My role at the moment is I'm working out of the Liverpool office, working with a team to improve BBA's working practices, bring in new ways of working, and to a certain extent, try and improve their understanding of fire and fire behaviour.
Yes. In your current role, you say a team to improve BBA's working practices. Does any of that involve examining or putting into practice lessons learned as a result of the Grenfell Tower fire?
Yes, it does. Yes. The new managing director is very keen to take the lessons and the recommendations from the Hackett report and all of the lessons that are coming out of the inquiry, and making sure that they're not going to happen again. In one way or other. And it's you listen to him, and that's top of his agenda without a doubt.
Right. And what's that gentleman's name?
It's Hardy Geisler, sorry.
Right. The transcriber might struggle with that. I'm going to have to ask you to spell it.
Giesler, I think.
I think it's probably me then, not being able to hear it. Just help me. Were you provided with a report or briefing or document which set out your role of implementing these lessons learned from the Grenfell Tower fire when you arrived at the BBA?
No, I wasn't specifically. So when I was employed, I wasn't specifically brought in with fire in mind. I think what's happened is, since I've been here, we've now got a new technical director, and I think possibly there may be things that will utilize my knowledge of fire going forward, but that wasn't the principal reason I was employed.
Forgive me for this, but you say keen to take the lessons from the Grenfell Tower fire. Are you able to tell us in summary form what those lessons are that you are assisting to learn and implement?
You mean specifically in BBA or across?
BBA.
I think one of the things, to be honest, I don't really, I can say, but I think it will be my interpretation of it. I've not had a conversation with anybody directly to say, this is what we have found that is incorrect and this is what we want to improve. I think generally it's more along the lines of how we improve the construction industry and BBA's part in that, as opposed to necessarily BBA directly. Anything I say will be sort of supposition as to reading in what's going in, because I've not been party to any internal investigations. I don't know enough about what the shortfalls were to answer that question directly.
It's right, isn't it, that in the space of 3 years, summarising it, you went from test house to test house, to client to certifying body?
I did, yes.
Can we conclude, in general, from those rapidly sequential roles, that the relationships between client, testing house and certifier were and remain close?
I think it's like with any industry, there is a certain amount of you work. See, in terms of my involvement with the BBA, it was very limited in what I did at BRE, for example. But the skills that I have are interchangeable and relevant to what BBA do. So, and it's still part of the construction industry. So they are interchangeable, yes. And there is this, the client relationship and the contractor is, yes, yeah.
I'm going to change to a different topic, which is your knowledge of fire regulation. Given your background and your role, Mr. Clark, would you say that you had a good understanding of the regulations applicable in England and Wales? Fire safety.
Indeed, yes. I wouldn't say it was, if you asked me something, I would know where to go to look it up. It's not encyclopedic in that way, but I would say, yes, I would know.
Yes. Can I show you paragraph 22 of your statement at page 5? You say there, I have personally been involved in BS 8414 testing since 1999 and have worked as part of the team to develop both BS 8414 Part 1 and BS 8414 Part 2. The work involved undertaking testing on the various products, both with and without fire barriers. The initial work formed the basis of BS 8414 Part 1, which was published in 2002. Now, when you say you were involved in BS 8414 testing since 1999, and that's 3 years, isn't it, before publication of the standard in 2002?
Yes.
Yes. When you were involved, did you mean involved in the preparatory work for the testing?
Yes. So at that time, the BRE was still had its Cardington laboratory, and there were a number of test walls at that laboratory which were used to form the basis of the BR 135 document. So in that document, there are a number of tests that myself and others undertook as part of that document, and also went in towards the 8414.
And what did those tests involve?
So at the time, Most of the systems that were on the market were what we call external wall insulation systems, and they would either be a mineral fiber system or an expanded polystyrene system. They would generally be mechanically fixed back to a blockwork substrate. So the part one test is for the blockwork substrate wall, and then they would be rendered and with a decorative finish and a reinforcing mesh over the top of them. So they were what we call external wall insulation systems.
Now, the 1999 date for start predated, didn't it, the All Parliamentary Group inquiry in 2000 into the safety of cladding as a result of the Garnet Court fire in 1999, didn't it?
I can't say, to be honest. I was, at the time, I wasn't aware of that. It was just a job I was doing. So that was beyond what I was, where I was. I was more a technician at that point.
I see. After the APBG inquiry in 2000, did you get to see or get any training on the findings of that inquiry, its conclusions?
I would say no.
Okay. Were the BS8414 test and the BR135 criteria something developed by the BRE from 1999 on its own initiative, or was it responding to demands from central government to improve fire safety?
My understanding, it was driven from central government. Yes.
Right. So can we say that it was driven by central government even before the Garnet Court fire in 1999? To be honest, I can't answer that question. Before 1999, I didn't have the understanding at that time to be able to answer that question. From this position now, I would say probably yes. From my knowledge now, but in 1999, I would have struggled to answer that question. That's very fair. Now, we know from BRE's website that the BRE was privatised by Michael Heseltine, who was the then Deputy Prime Minister, in March 1997. When you started working on BS8414 in 1999, was it the goal to use the BS8414 test to BRE's commercial advantage?
No, not that I was aware. No, there would be a commercial advantage for any test, but the thing with the fact it became a British standard gave anybody in the world the ability to undertake that test. So if it was, I think particularly if it was going to be primarily for BRE's commercial advantage, it wouldn't have been published as a British standard. But given BRE's position at the time, it inherently became something that BRE did because it was the only organisation that had the facilities to undertake that.
Exactly, and I was going to suggest to you that it would have had first mover advantage, wouldn't it, if BS8414 became, as it did, a British standard?
I suppose the answer would be yes, but as I say, it's like anything. If you're at the early adoption stage and you do the research, then if you've got that facility there already, you're at that advantage straight away. Why particularly other organisations didn't choose to take up the testing, I don't particularly know. I wasn't commercial in that regard, and that would be a question you'd have to sort of ask other people. And in reality, until the fire at the Grenfell Tower, there weren't many other organisations doing 8414 testing.
No, but from the start of your involvement, did you see, or was it the case that the BS8414 test was a potential source of revenue for the BRE?
I'd never heard it in that terms. No, it's a test that is done for. When I started, I was never in that position where I was talking about the financial aspects of it. I was a technician, and I wasn't party to those conversations. It's a question. It would only be supposition as to whether that was their intention.
I see. Can you tell us from your own knowledge how the BRE was going to make its money to stand on its own 2 feet, having been privatised from 1997?
No, again, it would be my interpretation of what was there. I'd never seen anything to say, this is what we've got to do, we've got to target this, we've got to do that. I can't answer that question.
See, the reason I'm asking you is this hypothesis that having been privatised, the BS 8414 test would be a source of revenue, so the more tests you did, the more revenue you would make. Can you comment on that?
Well, that's, yeah, that it goes without saying, really. Yes, yeah, I agree. Yes.
Yes. And the more successful tests you did for a client, the more they would want to come back, and confidence that you would pass their products.
No, I would argue it was the other way around, in a way, because if a client does a successful test, they go away and they may not come back. But if they're doing unsuccessful tests, then they may need to come back. But we're not. The whole idea of the 8414 test was to make sure that systems were compliant with the building regulations, and ultimately, I don't think they made a lot of money out of it. It's quite an expensive test.
To your recollection, did anybody at the time take any steps to consider whether there were any inherent conflicts of interest within the BRE in carrying out tests designed to protect life safety for money?
No, because every single test that anybody does in any sphere of regulation or you could argue is BSI in the same position when they're checking PPE. Any organisation that has a remit to undertake testing for life safety for commercial gain would always be accused of doing that. I don't think BRE was in a position where they ever made lots and lots and lots of money. We're not a blue chip company, and even if they did, the way the organisation is structured is that it's a not for profit, and any profit that was made goes back into research and PhDs and investment in making the built environment better. So it wasn't going to shareholders in that regard. There was nobody driving that you have to do this because I'm not going to get my dividend at the end of the year.
No, I understand that. I'm just seeking to understand whether, as a matter of fact, there were any such investigations or considerations. What about later on? Were there any steps taken to examine the propriety of these commercial pressures at any time before you left?
That's a question I cannot answer because it was a question I wasn't involved in that regard of the business. That's probably, if you need to ask that question, that's somebody like Steve Howard or Tony Baker may be able to answer that question. But I can't answer that question.
Very well. Were you aware that approved document B did not mention the criteria in BR 135 as an alternative route to compliance in paragraph 12.5 of approved document B until the 2006 edition of ADB was published in April 2007?
I wasn't aware of it directly, no.
What was your understanding of why sponsors were carrying out or wanting you to carry out BS 8414 tests before 2006, 2007, when the alternative route to compliance did not exist in approved document B?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? Sorry.
Why did sponsors want you to carry out BS 8414 tests before the BS 8414 test was enshrined in approved document B?
Again, I don't know the answer to that. Did you say BR 135 was not until the 2006 version, or 8414 as a whole?
The criteria in BR 135 as a route to compliance.
Right, but my understanding was that BS 8414 was still a test you could undertake
From 2002.
Yes, yeah. It still gave the ability to get onto high-rise buildings, and it was a demonstration of the system's performance in terms of fire spread. So it was still a valid test. As with all of these things, the evolution of safety and understanding changes, and clearly there was a decision made in 2006 that the criteria set out in BR 135 was something that the government body thought was is something to attain, and a minimum standard that systems should achieve.
Yes, but given that the alternative route to compliance with ADB, namely by passing a BS 8414 full system test and meeting the BR 135 criteria, was not enshrined in the regulation until the 2006 amendments to ADB, the question is, why did sponsors carry out those tests before that date?
That's a question I couldn't answer. At that time, around 2006, I wasn't in a position where they were the conversations I was having with people. That would be the likes of my colleague Sarah Colwell, Richard Colwell, who were predominantly working for that. So I was in more of a technician role at that point. So it's a conversation I never had with anybody and was necessarily aware of. It could be that, and this is just my pure supposition, is that the regulations hadn't been updated for a while, and it was just decided. I think there was a program of updating the building regulations in 2006, some of which I was involved with, and it may just have been that it was a prudent time to put it in.
Did the BRE think or see it that if BS 8414 system tests and BR 135 became a formal alternative route to compliance with ADB, then that would work to the BRE's commercial advantage?
Again, I wasn't party to commercial conversations like that, so it would be pure supposition. To any answer I would give would be just my supposition as to.
Did the BRE play any part, do you know, in pushing the BS 8414 test and the BR 135 criteria into becoming enshrined in approved document B as the alternative route to compliance?
So I think to a certain extent you need to understand the history of BRE and how it works with government and where it sits in terms of, because BRE and particularly the Fire Research Station as was, because they amalgamated in 1997, 96, 97. That was the government's prime source of information for regulation, particularly around fire and that they used BRE in that way as their source of information is my feeling for what that did. Even though the organisation was privatised, it was still their main go-to facility to get the questions answered.
Yes, I'm not quite sure that answers my question, but I'll ask it again. Did the BRE, do you know, play any part in pushing the BS 8414 test to BR 135 criteria into becoming enshrined in the approved document B as the alternative route to compliance?
Again, I can't, because I wasn't party to that. I can't say definitively. I would be very surprised if they weren't. But not because there was a commercial advantage, because it was the right thing to do to address the issues that had come to light.
Who was involved, do you know, from the BRE's side in that campaign, is one way of putting it, but that effort?
My understanding is that was primarily driven by Dr. Sarah Colwell and who else? Maybe Dr. Debbie Smith, maybe. I can't recall. I think Dr. Sarah Colwell was probably the main driver of that. Yeah.
Does the name Brian Martin ring any bells with you?
Yes, I know Brian, yes.
Was he involved in this effort?
I don't think he was, no. I think he had a different remit at his time in BRE.
He was employed by the BRE, I think, and seconded to the government department, which later became DCLG and now the HCLG, and worked there 3 days a week to lead on getting BS 8414 and BR 135 into ADB. Is what I've just said correct, to your knowledge?
I knew he was seconded to, was it ODPM at the time, Office of the Deputy Prime Minister? I wasn't aware of what he was doing there, no. It's not a conversation I'd ever had with him, and he never said, oh, this is what I'm doing there. So I'm not aware of that. I'm just aware he was seconded.
Right. Would it be fair, from your own knowledge, to describe BS 8414 and BR 135, which is the criteria you use, as a joint project, as between the BRE on the one hand and government on the other, with Brian Martin on both sides?
Yes, I think that would probably be a fair thing, yes. From where I stand, obviously I've got nothing in terms of what I've seen in terms of paperwork or audit trail to say that, but I think the way it worked, I think that would be a fair assumption, yes.
Do you remember whether Kingspan was involved in any way in contributing to the discussions about whether or not an alternative route to compliance should be written into the regulation, where combustible insulation was to be used within a cladding system?
My understanding is, and having sort of, if you see British standards, there's normally something at the beginning of the standard where it lists participants who have been used to draw together the standard, and that is usually not individual organisations, but I think British BSI, for example, would look to the likes of BBA, BRE, Warrington Fire, BSI, obviously, and I think at the time when the first version of the 8414, I think an organisation called BRFMA were involved, which is the British Urethane Manufacturers Association. I think they were part of the committee that drew that up, but that was also as well the likes of Rockwool and other organisations. I don't know whether Kingspan specifically were, but I know in terms of what they made their trade association was, I think, if I recall. So
Kingspan and Rockwool as voices within BRFMA, who would be a consultee for British standards.
So BRFMA were the Urethane Manufacturers Association, so Rockwool wouldn't sit under that, but they may have been represented by another body, another trade association. I can't remember what they would come under.
Going back to BR 135 for a moment, we know that the 2003 edition of that publication was co-authored by Brian Martin. Did you have any input into the writing of that edition?
Not the writing, no. I was not involved in that.
What about the research for it?
2000, no, I don't think anything specifically new was put in, unless they used the test data for the rain screen Appendix B, I think, isn't it, for the BS 8414 Part 2. So the data we produced as part of that research for that may have gone in, but I wasn't involved directly, no.
You worked with Brian Martin on that edition, even on the research side?
Not that I recall, no. Not third edition, no. I think by that time most of the research had been done. Anyway.
Can I ask you to look, please, at paragraph 20 of your statement at page 4? You say there, in the fourth line down, halfway down the paragraph, it is important to note that each test report and each classification report is applicable only to the particular system tested. The fact that a system with one or more specified components has been classified to BR135 says nothing about whether a different system containing the same components will or will not achieve such classification. Was that an understanding of BS 8414 and BR135 that you always had?
Yes, yes. It's a system test.
Yes. Did you at any point form the view that the UK construction industry was not fully aware of that limitation?
In terms of a personal view or
personal professional view, your view at work?
I think it was, you needed to explain it to them, I think on occasions, yes, yeah. Particularly if people weren't necessarily understanding of the standard. They'd heard about it and they understood there was a requirement for it, but they wouldn't necessarily understand it was a system test unless you explained it to them. I think there was it's like any test. Sometimes people hear these things, but you need to explain actually what it means.
Did the BRE, to your knowledge, take steps positively to make sure that its clients, the likes of Kingspan and Celetex perhaps, were aware that there was this gap in knowledge?
I think they did, yes. Yeah, I've seen over the years several presentations that were given by the likes of Sarah Colwell and Stephen Howard and I think Debbie Smith and others, where they do go out and say, look, this is a system test. This is the regulation that it's designed to meet. These are the routes that you can undertake. And I have seen definitely presentations of it in forum where that it would be appreciated and understood. Yes, I think they went out their way to do that. Yeah.
From 2003 until it was revised in 2013, and perhaps even after that, did you consider that BR135 in either edition, second or third, was clear enough that BS 8414 was a full system test?
To be honest, the role I was in, I wasn't really considering BR135. I think I say in my statement that I was predominantly on the testing side, and the interpretation and issuing of BR135 was done by other people in the organisation. So it wasn't something I concerned myself with day to day.
Was there a concern generally at the BRE that it was not clear to customers that a system which had passed the BS 8414 test had to be replicated exactly in its application on a building, and any deviation would make the system so applied non-compliant?
It's not something I'd heard generally, but it would be explained to clients in that respect, yes. So it wasn't something that BRE were hiding, that this is a system test and that's it, yes.
To your understanding, did clients, in other words, the likes of Kingspan and Celetex, which is what I mean by that in this question, did clients fully understand that principle?
Yes, I think so. Yes, yes.
Did you ever have occasion to have to spell it out to a client?
Not that I can recall. No, no, not directly. To say somebody said, "Oh, if I do X, can I do Y?" No, I can't ever recall having sat down to somebody and say, "Look, you do understand this is a system test. You can only do this." I think it wasn't the sort of conversation I would ever have. No.
Now, given that the BRE tests and classification reports it produced refer only to the particular test system containing the product installed at the time of the test, do you agree that it was vitally important always that the component parts of the test are fully and accurately identified in the test report and in the classification report?
Yes, without a doubt.
I'm now going to ask you about BRE processes and procedures. And Mr. Chairman, I'm unlikely to get to finish this before the break, but I could make a reasonable start.
What would you prefer to do, Mr. Millett? We could take the break slightly early, or you can run on for a bit if you'd rather do that.
I think I can run on from it for a little bit, and if I have to stop midway through the topic, there's no real problem with it.
All right, carry on then.
I'll carry on for a little bit. At the times when you were running the cladding testing program, were you fully familiar with the BRE standard procedures?
BRE had a plethora of standard procedures. It depends which one you're talking about.
All of them that apply to your testing.
The ones that apply to testing, as far as I was aware, yes. It's like anything. If you don't know something, you don't know it in a way.
Yes, I understand. Were you responsible for ensuring that the standard procedures were followed in respect of tests carried out?
For what period, sorry, were you talking about?
For the period that you were running the testing cladding program, which I think was from 2004, as you told us.
Yes, I was aware, yes.
At paragraphs 38 to 39 of your statement, I don't think we need to go to it, page 8, you say, well, you set out the role of the client stroke project officer. Is that one person, client stroke project officer?
Not necessarily. So in terms of delivery of the testing, the way the amount of staff we had, then probably yes, it was predominantly me, I would have said. It depends at what point in the process you're talking about, because the way it was structured was that I would be handed the testing part of the contract. So the likes of Tony Baker or Steve Howard may have done the preliminary work to get the client to sign up to the contract. I would then take them through the testing process. So in terms of the testing side of it, then I would say yes, that was predominantly one person.
And is that the same as the officer in charge in the list of test personnel that you provide at paragraphs 42 and 46 of your statement?
Yes, because what would tend to happen was I would be the officer in charge, and then my colleague would be the safety officer. So yes, I would say. Primarily because I was the person doing most of the testing anyway, so they were dual role.
Right. And who would be responsible for ensuring that, as you put it in your statement at paragraph 38, all required information regarding the materials, fixings and names of the materials being installed had been provided?
Day-to-day on site, that would more than likely be my role. There was an occasion where I wasn't necessarily always there, so I would ask other people to do it, and that did include, to a certain extent, Stephen Howard if I was out. On occasion, as we had an apprentice who sometimes would do that, but then I would check. So I would say predominantly me, because I was the person mainly running the test.
Now, in the next paragraph 39, you say that that person would request a sample of each of the components used in the construction of the test system, and where possible, photos are taken. Would that person be you again, where you were in charge
Uh,
of the test?
I think towards the latter part of before I moved on to other things, that was being done by other people. There was an occasion where I think Steve Howard had decided he wanted other people to become involved. And I think at least one of the Kingspan Trespa reports was done by a gentleman called, forgotten his name, sorry, Connor McIntosh.
Yes.
Yes.
When did Steve Howard decide that he wanted other people to become involved?
I think that was probably 2016, maybe, or 15, 16.
And when samples were provided, what would happen to them?
As in, would we keep samples, do you mean?
They would come in. What would be the process? The samples would arrive. Where would they go?
So the way the burn hole worked is that we had 4 test facilities, took 4 test walls that we would use, and the client would be allocated an area within the sort of in front of the wall, and their material would be delivered to as close to the wall as we could. They would then take control of their materials, and in terms of how it would work for me to go and get the information, I would go down at some point when it was convenient and say, look, I need to come down. Can you pull together all of the components that you are using for me? And I would photograph them, and then they would be given back.
I see. So was the system that was operated that for every component of a test that came into the burn hall, you or perhaps one of your assistants would photograph them and log them?
Yes, but they weren't kept. They were just recorded on a photograph. We didn't keep samples.
You didn't keep the samples, but did you keep the photographs?
Yes, the photographs were kept, yes.
A log of each and every sample with a photograph that came into the burn hall for any particular test, is that right?
Yes.
I see. And you say you take photographs where possible. When would it not be possible to take photographs?
Sometimes, I don't know really. I put there where possible. There probably wasn't an occasion where it wasn't possible.
So can we say that it was the invariable practice of the BRE
Yes.
photograph samples as they came into the burn hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
And is it right that the project officer would also record the details of each component from their own examination?
Most of the time, the photograph would suffice. So there weren't sort of written descriptions of things. The photograph was sufficient in most cases. One of the practices I try to always do is to make sure that we got the packaging that the material came in photographed, as well as the item, because obviously if you take a picture of a screw, it means nothing if you don't actually know what it refers to. So we would predominantly take a picture of the box that it came in and the label on the box.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, we're mid topic, as I predicted we would be, which is no bad thing, but this might be a convenient moment for a break.
All right. Well, if that's convenient to you, Mr. Millett, I think we'll take a break. Mr. Clark, I said we'd have a break during the morning. We'll take it now. We'll resume, please, at 25 to 12. Okay. And I will remember this time to remind you, please, not to talk to anyone about your evidence during the break.
Yeah, not a problem.
All right. We'll see you a bit later then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We are now in a position to resume hearing evidence from Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark, are you there? Can you hear me and can you see me?
I can hear you and see you, sir, yes.
Thank you very much. Then when you're ready, Mr. Millett, on you go.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clark, can I just ask you, please, to go back to the transcript from this morning, and I will put the exchange we had at page 25. I don't think it's necessary for it to be displayed, but I was asking you about the circumstances in which you left Kingspan, and you said that they'd obviously decided to get rid of me for one reason or another. And I asked you, did you feel that that was genuine? And you said, not necessarily, no. My question, what did you think lay behind it? And you said it was not long after that happened that the information came out of what Kingspan had been doing in terms of the falsification of tests. I think that may have played a little part. And then you said, I've got no substantive evidence to say that that was just a feeling I had. And then I asked you at the time, and you said, yes. And my question, following on from that, is the feeling that you had at the time, was that based on any discussions or conversations or documents that you'd seen at the time which led you to have that feeling?
No. It was just the way it was, how quickly it was done. I'd been there for 18 months. My understanding was that I was a key part of what they wanted to do. And all of a sudden, you're called into an office and we want you to leave. And it was only really when it was disclosed to Dr. Smith at BRE about these tests, which they've subsequently withdrawn, that I sort of put two and two together and thought, have they just used COVID as an excuse for something, or had they? Yeah, it just didn't sort of seem to fit.
That was after you left?
After I left, yes.
So at the time you were handed your redundancy notice, is this right? You didn't connect that with what you later discovered about the falsification of the...
No.
Thank you for clarifying that. I want to just continue exactly where I left off, if I may then, with paragraph 41 of your statement, please. If we can go to paragraph 41 on page 11. And you say there, the responsibility for comparing drawings and the test specimen as delivered to the BRE was usually the responsibility of the test officer and a senior staff member who would sign off the final test report. If errors and omissions were spotted, these would usually be rectified through the reissue of amended drawings, with the original drawings held on file. It has been known for drawings to be issued by the client post-test, which would subsequently be checked as part of the report drafting and sign-off process. See that?
Yes.
Sorry, I seem to have lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I've lost my image of everybody, but I have the document. My question is, how would that check, well, the visual inspection that's carried out, would that be carried out by the project officer or officer in charge?
By the project officer. So the officer in charge, just for clarity, would only be there during the test itself. So it was a role that was given during the test, just to be clear.
And you say that, well, if we can go to paragraph 41 of your statement, please. You can see that you refer to the test officer there. That's the project officer, is it?
Yes.
Right. And then you say also that a senior staff member who signed off the final report would also make this comparison. Would that person be relying on the photos?
To a certain extent, and the drawing, yes, both, really, yes.
Can we go to paragraph 50 of your statement, please, page 11? You say a test file was also required to be prepared and maintained in respect of each test. Would that be an electronic copy or a hard copy?
It depended what the material was. I think I say in there some of the things, for example, large data sets of thermocouple data would be kept electronically. Predominantly all of the pictures and the photographs and any drawings would be printed off and put into a paper file. That would also include the risk assessment method statement and MSDS sheets and that type of thing for the materials, but majority of the things would go in there, yes.
I see. And where would those files be kept?
Day to day, they would be on my desk predominantly, and then once they were complete, they would be passed up to the senior staff member.
Right.
But
so just summarising your evidence at paragraph 50, can we just be clear that the test file was required to include, first of all, drawings of the system, yes?
Yes.
Delivery notes of materials received by the BRE for the test system, yes?
Where we could get hold of them, what you need to appreciate is that we took the materials on behalf of the client. We weren't in control of them. So they would be delivered. If we could get a copy of the delivery note, we would try to take it, but it wasn't always the case that we would always take it. Ultimately, the materials are the client's materials.
What about notes taken by the test officer detailing the construction of the test system? That would be on the test file, would it?
It would be, yes. That should be, yeah.
Right.
Some of these, don't forget, would have been done electronically as well. So they would be in a filing system on the network drives.
I see. And photographic evidence of construction of the test system and the materials and components used in that construction, those will also be on the test file, would they?
Yes. What tended to happen was that they would be stored centrally on the IT system first, and then in preparation when the test had been completed and the file was put together with the first draft of the report, then they would be printed off, but they wouldn't be printed off as a matter of course.
No, but they'd be kept on the test file. So
yes.
if they go back and review it later, they'd be there.
They would, yes, yes.
And then there would also be, would there, a systems and components photo collection sheet? Is that right?
Yes, yes. Not always in a sheet, but yeah, they would be taken as a series of pictures. Yes.
And that would be to ensure photographs of the relevant and important components were taken.
Correct? Yes.
Yes. Are those the updated documents that you drafted in 2013?
13. Yes, I think so.
By which I mean the cladding test data file and report preparation sheet.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes. So just to be clear, they wouldn't necessarily always be put into that format, but that was a basis to say this is what you need to collect. So they may have just been a series of photographs. They wouldn't necessarily have always been put directly onto a sheet in that regard.
I see. And would responsibility for completing those sheets or those that checklist also rest with the officer in charge, as you described that person?
No, the project officer really.
Project officer, right.
But just to be clear, so that the officer in charge for health and safety, it had always been the thing at BRE that you would have designated people who were in control of certain things during the test, so that there was a defined role for each person. An officer in charge is specifically for the test only, not for the preparation of the information. So that person may only necessarily come in on the day of the test. They wouldn't be there at other points.
I follow that. Can I show you BRE 5769, please, at page 302. This is a document entitled Procedures for Undertaking BS 8414 Tests, Parts 1 and 2 Tests, and it was exhibited to your statement. So I'm assuming you're familiar with it.
Indeed, yes, I think I pulled it together.
And it sets out a checklist of actions which can be undertaken by anyone, but need, I think, to be signed off by the person identified. Is that correct in general as a description?
Yes, yes.
And you can see TO is test officer, OIC officer in charge, SO is safety officer. So can we see clearly the distinction there between the test officer and the officer in charge?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I see. Does this document date to that exercise in 2013? You did.
Sorry, could you remind me of which exercise you're talking about?
Did you compile this document in 2013?
Oh, I compiled this document. Yes, it was, yes.
Did it formalise what was already common practice within the BRE, or was this a new start?
No, it formalised what was common practice, yes.
I see. And we could, looking at the document, if we scroll a little bit further down, we can see TO under task, TO cameras and CCTV setup, and then we can see who's responsible for what, and we can see the safety actions prior to countdown are all the safety officer, and then at logger start it becomes the test officer and the officer in charge. And the logger system starts, countdown clock starts, all cameras, etc. And if we scroll down a little bit further, please, can we just move through the document on the screen? We can see that on this page, page 303, the TO and the OIC take test notes, and the TO, the test officer, takes test photos. And then underneath that, after the test, you go over the page to page 304, which I think is the last page of the document. There's nothing there. Okay, then you test observations. There's a sheet for test observations. Would that normally be filled in?
Yes, yes. So initially we were handwriting them, and I think towards the end I was typing them in on an iPad, but yeah, essentially that.
Right.
Yes.
Who would be responsible normally for filling in the test observations sheet? Would it be the TO or the officer in charge, the OIC?
The test officer.
Can I just ask you some general questions about ISO 9001? Was the BRE ever, during your time there, ever accredited to ISO 9001?
I think it's always been accredited as far as I'm aware. It wasn't something I was involved with, but I think they would have been. I'd be very surprised if they weren't.
Do you recall whether there were any regular internal audits under the auspices of ISO 9001?
Specifically involving fire testing?
Specifically your area of activity?
Not for 9001, no. I'd never been audited for 9001, no.
Right. Have you ever been audited for any other under any other standard?
17025, which is the laboratory and testing standard.
I see.
But that would be through UCAS, United Kingdom Accreditation Service.
And what about external audits? Do you know whether the BRE was ever the subject of external audits pursuant to ISO 9001?
It wasn't my remit, so I wouldn't know. I can't answer that question, I'm afraid.
Right. Did you ever have any dealings with any external auditors who were sent in to audit your activities under ISO 9001?
Not 9001, no, never, no.
Okay.
As with organisations, you'd sort of see emails going through that. I think they were for 14,001, 9001, but it was never directly towards me, no.
Right. Were you ever asked any questions or asked to do any tasks to support any audit, internal or external, under ISO 9001?
Not that I can recall, no, never.
Were any of your systems that you established, such as the checklist that we've seen, done pursuant to any recommendation or requirement under ISO 9001?
I think I recall having a conversation with Michael Pratt at some point about getting them formally onto the system, but I can't remember what happened with that.
Right. Who's Michael Pratt?
He was the compliance manager, I think. Compliance, yeah.
I want to turn now to the topic of Celetex, which is a very big topic, which will almost certainly occupy us for the rest of the day, if not most of the rest of the day. And I want to start with the February 2014 test for our RS5000.
Yes.
And to begin with your involvement before the test, can we go please to BRE 403384? BRE 403384. This is an email of the 4th of June 2013, where we see your colleague Tony Baker forwarding you an email from John Roper at Celetex, in which he inquired about availability to carry out a BS8414 test in the August of that year. You see that?
I do, yes.
If you look at the second email down, you can see that Jonathan Roper says to Tony Baker in the first main paragraph, which starts Tony, in the third line, he says, all I can advise currently is that it will be a part 2 test consisting of a standard rain screen cladding build-up with Trespa cladding fixed to an envelope, railing and helping hand system. Now we can see what it gets sent on to you from the top of the page. If we can scroll up to that. On the same day, hi Phil, see below, Celetex are looking for a date. Was this your first involvement with Celetex in the context of BS8414 testing?
As far as I'm aware, yes. I wasn't involved in anything else before this, as far as I was aware.
Can we go to BRE 403453, please? And let's look at the email halfway down on that page, page 1, sent at 8:38 in the morning by Stephen Howard to Kelvin Annable and to you on the 8th of November 2013, so some months later. And you can see that Stephen Howard says, another cladding system, we have Kingspan insulation in a week, commencing the 18th of November to do the build, polite nudge, still need to get a date for the day of the test. Celetex see below, they're after a test slot again, a frame system, but Kingspan insulation need to be out of the burn wall before they come in, confidentially. Can you let me have a start date, please? Your reply at the top of that page, we can see, to him on the 11th of November, you say, I've left a message with Mr. Roper about the timescales, and given Kingspan's timescales, it looks like that they will not be able to come in until early December. I'll let you know a date. When you say you left Mr. Roper a message, was that a voicemail?
I would probably think it was, yes.
I mean, we've seen no email correspondence about that in particular, so we've assumed it's a voicemail. Can you confirm?
I can't recall. I would say probably yes, as there's no email with it.
Did you often communicate with Mr. Roper by telephone?
I think what I tried to do was, if it was the first time we'd spoken to the client, or it was the first time the client had been introduced to me, I would make it my task to talk to them directly on the phone as opposed to through email, just to sort of introduce myself, let them know what they're expecting, etc., etc. Because I was primarily the main contact. It's different when you speak to somebody on the phone as it is if you just send them a random email, for two reasons. A, people might not necessarily read the email, but it's a bit more polite to have a face-to-face, a telephone conversation.
Can we go to BRE 405401, please? This is an email from Jonathan Roper to you, if we look at the bottom of the screen, 10th of December 2013. He says, Phil, as discussed, find attached drawings for review. I will get hold of our installers and request the information from them. If you could come back with some likely start on site dates, I'd be obliged. And then you can see that. Do you remember what had been discussed?
Was this after the previous email, date-wise?
Well, he says, Phil, as discussed, find attached drawings for review. Do you remember a discussion with him about the drawings?
Not about the drawings specifically. I think probably along the lines of what I said earlier, it would be a preliminary discussion to say, look, the hall is here, this is what we'd expect from you when you come to site. And I think later on there's probably an email where I ask for certain things in terms of what they need to provide before they come to site. So it'd probably be along the lines of the same as that email.
I see. So you'd asked him for drawings and he was saying, here they are, essentially. Is that right?
Yeah, what we tended to try and do was, one of the issues we'd had in the past is that people would have designed their system and then it wouldn't necessarily fit on the test rig. So what we would try to do is to make sure that we had at least some drawings, even though they were preliminary, to sort of say, look, these are the bits you need to understand. This isn't going to fit on for this reason, or you've not met that criteria. And that's primarily why he would have sent them.
Can we go to BRE 405410, please? This is an email to you from Jonathan Roper on the 8th of January 2014. And he asks you to confirm the dimensions required to meet the standard. And we can see your response at BRE 403501, please. On the 10th of January 2014, you say, Jonathan, I have marked up your drawing and I hope the information helps. You are correct about the widths and the height in that they need to be increased. If you need any other info or clarification, I'm happy to help. Was this sort of request common, that you would be asked to mark up a test sponsor's drawings?
Like I said earlier, one of the things is that you get a designer who designs a rig, a system. There are certain things in the way it's fitted onto the wall that you have to take into account. For example, if in the standard it says you have to have 6 meters clear height of the hearth, I've had systems where they've only done about 5 meters. So we'd have to go back to them and say, look, if you don't build it to the right height, you're not going to be in compliance with the test standard. So it was really just to say, you've covered all of the bits that mean that once you built the system, it will go on the rig, and B, it will also meet the criteria of the test standard. So it wasn't unusual.
I see. So just two purposes then in your assisting: one, to make sure that it had been built so it would go on the rig, but the other was so that it would, you said something else and it's not gone onto the transcript. It would comply with the criteria, I think is what you said.
Of the test standard, yes.
Standard.
Just for clarification, we weren't there saying, don't use this material, don't do that, I wouldn't make that that big, you need to move your cavity barriers. That's not what we were doing. It was primarily to show that all of the bits that you need to have a test sample that complies with the requirements of the test standard is met.
I follow. Can we look at the markup that you sent to Jonathan Roper on that day? It's an SEF 6052. These have not been disclosed by the BRE, but by Simco. SEF 6052. And first, are these the markups that you sent back to Jonathan Roper on that date?
Yes, I recognise those, and that is my writing.
And you can see, it is your writing, that was my next question. If you look at the writing at the very top, panel something on centerline, can you just decide?
Panel joint, that says.
On centerline. What were you seeking to identify from those words in that place?
In a test standard, there's a requirement for a joint on the centre line of the main wall. And it was to say that when you build the system that you have to have that in place.
And then the words on the right-hand side of the drawing, barrier may impact with 5 meter temperature measurements, move up. What was that? What were you seeking to impart there?
We had in the past an issue where, because the test standard is quite strict in where you put the thermocouples, if they put it at exactly 5 meters, it means that we will be drilling holes through the cavity barrier. And obviously that's not something you'd want to do. So it was a suggestion, move up or move down, so that we didn't drill loads of holes in it, essentially.
Is this an example of what you told us before, namely showing that the test sample, advising essentially that the test sample complied with the requirements of the test standard?
Yes.
So can we take it from this that to that extent at least, you were advising Celetex on how to build the rig so that the criteria of BR135 would be met?
Not of BR135, no.
So,
Different standard of FBS 8414.
right, okay.
Within that standard, there are certain things. So if you scroll down, for example, if you don't mind, I've drawn, so in their initial drawing, where the hearth is, they've drawn it without the return. See where the 2 meter mark is, 2000 millimeters? And then the bit below it says return to be 260 plus 0 minus 100. That is a requirement in the BS 8414 standard for that, whereas they'd left that out in their drawing. And had they built it in that, then it would be non-compliant with the requirements of 8414.
And what requirement in BS 8414 were you seeking to advise them to meet by the words barrier may impact with 5 millimeter or 5 meter temperature measurements move up?
No, it was to say to them that we have to instrument at that point. If you put your barrier there, we are going to likely to drill lots of holes in it, which potentially would make the barrier ineffective. We don't want to obviously damage stuff that is critical to the test. No more than that.
Did you get the impression at this time, January 14, that Celetex were relying on the BRE for technical knowledge about how to approach a BS 8414 test?
Yes, but not just, they weren't unique at all, no. It's quite a, if you've not looked into it, it's quite an interesting test, and not everybody, the designers using their CAD, they can design stuff to a building and they'll do it very well, but this has got specific characteristics that it has to have as part of the test. And that's all we were saying, is that you have to meet this.
So to that extent, at least, Celetex, you say, were relying on the BRE for technical advice?
Yes, but they were not unique. What you need to understand is, if I'd have not said that, and they came and built it, then they'd be going, well, why didn't you tell us that? So it's incumbent on us to say that you have to have these in here. And we do this at the early stage before they built it and finished, so that we're not having to undo what they've done.
Let's turn to the February 2014 test itself. That was carried out on the 14th of February 2014. If we can go please to page 36 of your witness statement, we can see paragraph 148 there. See what you say. You deal with the exchanges in early January with Mr. Roper, but that's in paragraph 149. But in 148, in answer to the question, what components made up the tested system in this occasion, it is said, to the best of my recollection, the system consisted of the following, working from the rear of the system. You set out the components: 2 layers of fireline plasterboard fixed to a Simcoe lightweight steel supporting frame, a magnesium oxide sheathing system attached to the front of the lightweight steel frame, Celetex installation board, I think it should be insulation board.
So it's a typographical area.
Vertical closed mineral fiber type fire barriers, horizontal intumescent open state and mineral fiber fire barriers manufactured by Lamatherm, and a Marlia Ternit Natura decorative facade fixed to aluminium rails, carrier rails, which were mechanically fixed to the sheathing board. Now, you provide that list, and you say that that is to the best of my recollection at the beginning of the paragraph. Are you suggesting that you made this list entirely from memory?
I can't recall, to be honest. I doubt it, seeing as I've said manufactured by Lamatherm.
Why is that? Is that because you'd never remember the particular manufacturer?
No, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that was my question. Did you look at any BRE records to recall this information?
Only what I was sent by the inquiry.
Well, is what you were sent by the inquiry, or was what you were sent by the inquiry, sufficient for you to be able to compile this list?
I recall there was some, I think I said it in the next paragraph down, 149. I think that CB 11301 was possibly something I had to hand. That was a drawing, a through section drawing, I think, maybe.
Right. I think we may have lost you just a little bit in sound quality just then.
Do you want to repeat what I said?
Yes, could you please?
Yeah, so I think the initial drawing that may have been sent may have had some of that information on, and some of the drawings that I had may have had some of that information on. So possibly I used that to clarify the points.
We don't see in paragraph 148 any reference to any document. And that's why I'm asking you these questions, where you got this information from. Did you refresh your memory from documents when you made this statement, or is this a list that you recall at the time? The time you did your statement?
I think initially what I did was I dictated it as I remembered it, and then maybe I may have just checked through from a drawing, but to be honest, I can't recall.
I see. Can you explain why you didn't provide copies of the documents from which you got this information when you provided your statement?
I believe they are. I'd be very surprised if they're not in there. So everything that you had was what was issued to me by the inquiry. So
I see.
Yeah, unfortunately, as I say, at the time, I was no longer a BRE employee, so I was reliant on what was being sent to me.
Are you, when you did this statement, were you satisfied that the documents you were sent had come from a proper set of records for this test?
As far as I could see, yes, yeah.
There was nothing that alerted you to the fact that these documents were incomplete, or that the SOP, the statement of practice we saw earlier, was somehow incomplete in respect of this test?
No, I don't think so. No, I think there's some documents which were scanned in by BRE of the test file, and you can actually see where the punch holes have been picked up by the scanning process. And my understanding was that they were the paper that had been taken out of the test file and scanned in.
Now, you said earlier on in an answer that you had prepared this statement from documents, or this part of it at least, from documents sent to you by the inquiry. That's not right, is it? In fact, the documents were provided to you by the BRE or their solicitors, weren't they?
If that's what you say, I can't recall. I understood they came from the inquiry. I was issued a pack of stuff, maybe. I'm not certain who they came from.
Understanding from.
Sorry, Mr. Could you repeat the question?
Did you get your understanding that the documents you used to compile this paragraph had come from the inquiry?
That was just my understanding. It didn't say who they necessarily came from. I thought they'd been disclosed from the inquiry.
For the record, they didn't. They came from the BRE.
Right, okay, I stand corrected.
Let's move on then to the testing. Can we go to BRE 405425, please? This is an email appointment. Subject Celetex cladding test. Location Burnwall. Start 14th February 2014 at 11 o'clock, ending 3 o'clock same day. And if you look down the document, you can see that there are some required attendees and optional attendees. See that? There's a message. Guys, I would like to undertake the cladding test for wall 4 for Celetex with your assistance. There is a very real possibility the system may fail, so full PPE will be needed. Roles as usual, me as safety officer, Tom as officer in charge of firefighting backup, Leah as client liaison, supervision, Simon firefighting, Steve, and Paul, this is for information only and to agree the availability of Simon. Thanks, Phil. Remember that, you said that I'm showing you that.
Yes.
And showed you that you said there was a very real possibility that the system may fail, so full PPE will be needed. What led you to think that that test might well fail?
It was the first test they'd ever done. So what we tended to do is if there was no history of how a system would perform, we would err on the side of caution. So that was to basically say, look, I'm not certain what it's going to do. There is a likelihood that it may fail because it's a development product and has never been put through this system, just to make sure that people had their PPE with them, because you don't want to be doing this when it's failing. You want to make sure everybody's got everything with them before.
I see. So the fact that this was a first-time test was your pessimism, I think.
Yes, yeah. We, having done it for such a period of time, you can not always guarantee, but you should err on the side of caution. As a first test, they may be in a development stage where it wouldn't perform as well as they'd expected. So it's just an error of caution, really, yes.
I see. Was it your experience at that time, early 14? You've been there almost 10 years doing this, that sponsors would keep testing until they found a system or modification of a system that would pass?
Yes, they could do. Yes, yeah. There have been incidents where that had been the case. Yes.
Now, you can see this email sets out the roles, and it suggests that you were going to be the safety officer and Tom Lennon as the officer in charge. But in your statement, you say that this particular test was conducted under your own oversight. That's paragraph 152 at page 37.
Yes.
Is that right? Was it under your oversight, or were you going to be the safety officer?
Yes, no, those roles were sort of fairly fluid. I tended to take the officer in charge role because I was predominantly the person who took the notes. I think on the day we decided to swap the roles over.
So that you became officer in charge?
Yes.
And who became safety officer? Tom
Lennon, yes.
If we go to paragraph 147 of your statement, please, at page 35. You see that you say at the start of that paragraph, under the answer to the question, at what stage was the test terminated? Why was it terminated? I believe the test was terminated due to excessive flaming on the outer decorative facade of the system, which spread rapidly over the surface and burned over the top of the system. And then you go on to say, a little bit lower down the paragraph, the reason the test was terminated in this case would have been on the grounds of safety. Due to the rapid nature of the fire growth and no clear sign that the fire was reducing in size, the decision was taken to terminate the test. Is it right that the decision to terminate the test was taken on the grounds of safety and not simply because overtopping the rig would have prevented classification to BR135?
Yes. You get to a stage where you know if it's going to get any better or not, and the decision was it wasn't going to get any better, so it was better to stop it there.
As the officer in charge, was that your decision?
It was because from a testing point of view, I'd seen everything I needed to see to so there was no more to be gained in terms of the test. It wasn't that Tom Lennon said, right, you have to shut it down because it's dangerous. So I took the decision that there was no need to carry on.
What had you seen that you needed to, which meant that there was no more to be gained?
That the external Natura Turnip boards had pulled away from the cavity barrier. The cavity barrier was no longer effective. Most of the second and the upper layers of boards had fallen away, and it had exposed the core of the main surface face of the insulation, and it was clear that the fire was becoming out of control.
Right. Now, I'm afraid we lost you again just a little bit. Your sound dropped away very briefly. You said something before you said the cavity barrier was no longer effective. What was that?
That the board had pulled away and distorted, and that cavity barrier was no longer effective.
Distorted. Thank you. Now, can I then ask you about conversations after the test had been completed or had been terminated? Can we go to page 41 of this witness statement, please? You can see that at that page, question 8A asks this: in relation to any test to BS8414 on a system incorporating RS5000 on the 14th of February 2014, was the BRE asked by the test sponsor for any advice as to any aspect of the BS8414 testing process? If so, was any guidance or advice provided? What was the nature of any such advice? By whom? By and to whom was it provided? Sorry, it's a long question. Your answer starts at paragraph 172, and you say, I've set out full details of all exchanges between BRE and Celetex prior to the test on 14th of February 2014, to the best of my knowledge and recollection above. And if you go down a little bit further into paragraph 173, you say, for my own part, no guidance would have been given as to how or in which way a BS8414 test could be passed. Now, you say no guidance would have been given. Is that a statement of your general practice, or is it a statement specifically in relation to the 14th of February Celetex test?
General practice.
Now, we're going to look at the videos. Can we go to the video footage from the head camera that you were wearing. I should just ask you, can you confirm you were wearing a head camera during the tips, weren't you?
Confirm that, yes.
Yes. Now, I perhaps ought to give a trigger warning at this point, because we will see in the background some live fire on a test rig as part of this video. So if that image is going to be upsetting to anybody watching this, then that is something they will see, so they should stop watching. BRE 405659, please. And I'm going to ask the operator to play the video from 01.20 to 01.38. And what I want to ask you about starts at 01.24. And we can play it again a second time if we need to, Mr. Clark.
If you were to look at the cause of the failure that was used in part of the system, is it the cladding panel, the combustibility of the installation, or is it a combination of both those things? The problem you have with a lot of these systems is just making sure that you've got some substrate for the barrier to push against.
Now, we believe this conversation was between Jamie Hayes of Celetex and you, and much of it is, of course, indistinct. Let's have the transcript of that conversation, please, at INQ 3014137, at page 2. And I know it's an indistinct audio, Mr. Clark. We can play it again if need be. No, that's that is something completely different. Let me try again. INQ 3014137. That's it. Now, that is not a brilliantly legible version of this.
So I'm struggling to read it, so yes.
Yes, I know. I wonder if we've got a better one. We may do. There, that's clear now.
Yes.
Let's go halfway down page 2, please. And this is the transcript of the audio of that conversation. And can I just ask you to confirm that you've seen this before and have seen the audio, had an opportunity to check one against the other?
I have, yes, as far as I'm aware, yes.
Now, we can see halfway down page 2, where there's the first mention of male speaker 4. Can you see that? It says, if you
were looking.
Cause of the failure. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
That is Mr. Hayes, and he asks you for your view about the cause of the failure of the system. He says, if you were to look at the cause of the failure with a view to the parts of the system, is it the cladding panel, the combustibility of the insulation, or a combination of both those things? And we see a reply, male speaker 1. The problem you have with a lot of these systems is just making sure that you've got some substrate for the barrier to push against. And as soon as you lose that, then you've got an exposed core, potentially, and obviously that's got its own inherent surface spread of flame. And if that's more than the barrier can cope with, then, and then you're interrupted. Is that your reply to Mr.
That sounds, yes, that sounds coherent for what I would say. Yes, I would say.
Can we then go back to the video, BRE 405659, and play from 02.58 to the end? And the quote, or the section I want to ask you about, starts at 03.02. Play from 0.58 to the end, but this is particularly from 3.02.
I don't think the panel itself actually contributed much, from what I could see. I think it's just the fact that it distorted and broke away.
and you've basically lost your equipment to push against the barrier. But there isn't if it's cement based, you're obviously burning away all of the polymers and all the stuff that binds it together, and it just becomes friable and falls down. It's collapsed now right the way up, so there's nothing in place to stop the barrier, to give the barrier anything to push against.
Something that's hard to tip is barrier systems, which 99% of them are very similar to that. Use the method. If the facade drops away and it's got nothing to bounce against, then you're always going to have the same issue.
Now, I think you would have caught some of that at least.
I think I understand what's said.
Yes. Now, can we go to the transcript then? INQ, this is the same transcript, page 3. And on page 3, let's look at the final passage from male speaker 1, which is you. And you say, and tell me if it isn't, we believe it is. You say, I don't think the panel itself contributed much from what I've seen. I think it's just the fact that it distorted and broke away, and you've basically lost what you've got to push against the barrier. But there isn't if it's cement based, you're obviously burning away all of the polymers and all the stuff that binds it together and inaudible, or it falls down. It's fallen, it's collapsed now right the way up. So there's nothing in place to stop the barrier, to give the barrier anything to push against. Now, did you think at the time that these comments on the relative contribution of different parts of the system to the overall failure were the sorts of things that BRE should be advising a client?
I don't know if you could see, but in the video there's a structure which they're all standing next to, which is as I was watching it, was to the left, which meant that the clients from Celetex didn't have a direct view of the test rig. So what I was trying to put across was what I could see from where I was. And that was what I saw was that the board pulled away and gave such a large gap that the intumescent barrier would have never have fired off. So yeah, I don't see anything wrong with saying that. It was fact-based, and it was imparting the information that I had seen firsthand.
Yes. I know it's a difficult line to draw sometimes, and I appreciate that, but was there not an obvious risk to you at the time that this would be taken by Celetex as advice about the need for there to be something for the barrier to push against?
No, I wouldn't have said so.
I mean, if you're educating your client about precisely what has happened during the test, as it happens, is that not going to be taken as at least the basis for advice about how to improve the system the next time?
No, because we were talking about what happened there and then, and as I say, they couldn't see directly where it was, and from the angle that I was, you could see that the barrier had distorted to such an extent that it had essentially made the board had distorted that it made the barrier redundant, essentially. So no, I don't think there was anything wrong with that. It's not giving advice as to how to construct the system.
Did you turn the head camera off at that point?
I did, yes.
Did the conversation continue afterwards?
I don't recall necessarily. The reason it was turned off is because we used to just get hours of dribble if I've got to turn it off. So I'd get to a stage where I thought, right, let's turn it off because it's just wasted video filling up the network drive.
Do you recall whether the conversation continued after you turned the head cam off?
I don't recall, no.
There's one more thing to pick up from this video. If we could play the video again, this time from 0 to 2.35 to 0 to 2.46, and the quote, or part of it I want to ask you about, is at 0 to 2.39. Just play that. Then I'll show you the transcript.
Good, but I've seen worse.
Good. Something.
Yeah. The first attempt was quite bad actually. I've never done it before.
Now let's go to the transcript. That was pretty audible, I think, but
Yes.
the transcript anyway. INQ 3014137, page 2. And on page 2, in the very last part of the penultimate passage, male speaker 1, which starts, yeah, that might break off unless it's welded. Well, let's just look at the whole thing. You say, yeah, that might break off unless it's welded. You've obviously got, you've got the obviously inherent surface spread of flame on the material, so it stays in place. So if you've got 100 mil, you've got to burn through all of that before it just disappears. So sometimes you're in a situation where if all the material goes away and you take it away from the heat source, then that's brilliant. But if it stays in place, then it's burning, 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 and it's just pushing out the system really. And then you say something, I've seen worse. And just looking at all of that, that's advice, isn't it?
Advice to do what?
Well, it's the benefit of your experience that you're imparting to the client, isn't it?
No, it's a fact that I'm imparting in the way that these materials behave. So it's not advice. So if I was saying that if you're advising you to do something, then there would be some action that you would take. So I advise you to go and get me a glass of water, but that's not what this is. This is not advice. It's passing on information as to what was seen and how things behave.
With respect, it's not, is it? It's you're giving Celetex the benefit of your general knowledge and experience and expertise. You're telling Celetex what always happens in every situation, aren't you? That's the gist of what you're.
I would say probably not. No.
Well, you say so. Sometimes you're in a situation where, and you go on to explain. Well, that sometimes is the benefit of your advice. It's not what happened on this occasion. You're not simply facts. You're giving advice.
No, that is. I think that's what's happened in this occasion. So what I was saying was that the material had burned on the surface, and if you get to a situation where it's burned all the way through, then you've got nothing more to burn. That's, I don't see how this is what I'm advising them. It's yeah. I don't see it as advice now.
When you say I've seen worse, that is again the benefit of your professional experience. It's not a report of what happened. It's your judgment.
It is, but I don't go to clarify by saying I've seen worse and this did this did that. So it's a general statement post-test, talking to a client who it's the first time they'd ever seen a full-scale test, and they're always in a position where they want to understand how they perform to a certain extent. So no more than that.
And the same again on page 3, first comment at the end of the sentence. If we look at that, page 3, you say for a first attempt, it's not bad actually if you've never done it before. And again, same point. It's as you imparting to a client who wants to get their bearings, the benefit of your professional expertise and experience. No?
Yes, I would say that there's always that, but it's one of these things that you can say something to that regard. They're always going to want to know how their system has performed. To say not bad for a first attempt isn't advising them in any way, shape or form, I don't think.
Well, it's giving, as I say, we can characterize it a number of ways. It's not specific advice about what to do next time, but it's a comfort which would encourage them that the degree of failure, in your experience, wasn't so bad. You accept that at least?
Yes, I accept that. Yes, yeah, and that's why I said it. What you need to understand is, if you're in a position where you're developing a product, you need to have some benchmark to a certain extent. And if I'd have turned around and said, well, I can't tell you anything, well, nobody ever learns anything. And ultimately, we're there to drive safety. And if my advice drives safety, then I'm happy to give it. But I don't think that is advice. That was, yeah.
I'm just seeking to explore really to what extent it's true to say that you gave no guidance and would have given no guidance. And I'm just suggesting to you that although this isn't guidance about how to pass, it's nonetheless guidance in a broad sense. It's like anything, isn't it? It's open to interpretation. I wouldn't class it as guidance. It's imparting a degree of information to the client which doesn't give away other people's IP, doesn't tell them what to do, but gives them, they need to understand how their system is performing. And if they've got no benchmark, the only benchmark they have is what comes from me. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. In your statement, you covered at paragraphs 192 to 194 the comment about the rain screen having collapsed. And I think when you prepared your statement, you'd had reviewed the video for this test. Yes?
I think so, yes.
As I say, you referred to the comment about the rain screen having collapsed, so that there was nothing for the cavity barrier to push against. But you didn't mention the other comments about whether the cladding had contributed or whether this was frequently a problem. My question is, why is that?
I thought I had. It wasn't a deliberate omission, if that's what you're trying to say, but it was. I thought I had covered the whole of that transcript. To be honest, I've looked at so many videos and written so many transcripts. It may have got missed out.
Let's go to paragraph 201 of your statement on page 49, please. The question you're answering is question 8Q. On what basis did Celetex decide to arrange a further test to take place on the 2nd of May 2014? What discussions took place between you and any Celetex employee in respect of further testing? That's the question you're addressing. And at paragraph 201, you say, I am unaware of the reasoning for Celetex commissioning a second test, which was subsequently undertaken on 2nd of May 2014. And then you say, I do not know what advice may have been given by others as to how the test system might perform, including if the outer decorative boarding was changed. I do recall providing Mr. Raper with a photograph of the Celetex installation on the wing wall, which was behind the rain screen board. And you exhibit some photographs. And then you go on to say, after the reference to the 9 photographs showing the minimal damage, it therefore may have been on the presumption that the fire was not driven by the Celetex insulation component, but rather by the rain screen board opening up at the fire barriers and falling away, that Celetex decided to undertake a retest. This is, however, speculation on my part. Now, in fact, as we've seen from the transcript, you had told Celetex that the cause of the failure was the rain screen boards opening up, deforming, as you've now said, and falling away. So although you say it was speculation, it had a scientific basis nonetheless, didn't it?
Yes, I agree, yes.
And at the same page, paragraph 202, if we just go down there, please, at the bottom of the page, you say, I'm not aware of Celetex being made aware of any specific and or technical performance issues relating to the test carried out on 14th of February 2014, other than to confirm the primary spread of fire on the tested system, as I have explained above. Now that you've seen the transcripts and the video camera recording, with you commenting and advising on the test, do you accept that that is not a wholly accurate summation of the facts?
If you read it that way, potentially yes. But maybe I misinterpreted what it was meant by specific or technical issues relating to the performance. So maybe that's my misinterpretation, but
Yes.
I don't quite understand the question. Maybe
by having shown you the transcript, and there are other parts of the transcript we can look at some length, no doubt. But having shown you the transcript, I'm inviting you to accept that when you say I'm not aware of Celetex being made aware of any specific and/or technical performance issues relating to the test, other than to confirm the primary spread of fire on the tested system, that is an inaccurate and incomplete summary, because you were telling them a good deal else.
Yes, you may be right. Yes, I'll concede that one.
Yes, thank you. Paragraph 203, you say, in answer to question Q8S, was any advice or guidance sought by Celetex from the BRE in respect of the performance of the system tested? If so, by and from whom? What was the nature of the advice? And you say, I'm not aware that any advice was sought from BRE in relation to the performance of the system tested on 14th February 2014. As I've explained above, any advice from BRE could be deemed to constitute consultancy and would therefore fall outside the remit of its UCAS accreditation. It's therefore highly unlikely that any such advice would have been given, or would have been given, but been is missing. And had any been sought or requested, I expect that the request would have been rejected. Now again, by having shown you even just parts of the transcripts, you accept that that is an inaccurate and incomplete summary, given that we've seen what we've seen and heard of the conversations.
So I took that as post-test. Did they phone up and ask advice post the test? So that's why that was drafted in that way, I think. So maybe because I didn't necessarily recall what was said on the day, and because I don't class that necessarily advice, that's probably why I answered that in that way. So I'd assumed it meant, did they phone up and say, post the test, what do you advise we do?
I see. So you understood the question as limited in time to the time after the test?
Indeed, yes, yes.
But do you accept that, given what we've seen of what was said during the test, that the summary is not accurate and complete?
If you take the discussion that we had, which I class as a post-test debrief to a certain extent, if you take that as the way you're saying as advice, then that statement is correct, but that's not the way I interpreted it, no.
And on that basis, would you agree that the discussions that we've looked at on the transcript and in the video go beyond what was permissible given the scope of your UCAS accreditation?
I don't believe so, no.
It was consultancy, effectively, wasn't it?
No, I don't believe it to be, no.
Giving the benefit of your experience, knowledge, and making general statements about the behavior of this test in comparison with your general experience, why would that not be consultancy?
Because they get nothing to their advantage from it. They can't go back and say, so and so told me this, it's a general statement. It's a statement made after a test to a client as part of a conversation who is there paying to I can't answer the question other than that, really.
Well, they do get, I'm sorry to press you, but they do get something to their advantage, don't they? They get the experience of a technician who has seen loads of these tests, has done them for 10 years, has seen every test going, and who tells them not only about the primary causes of the failure, but also that you've seen worse and it's not too bad. Some people might pay a consultant an awful lot of money to have that comfort. No?
Not from my experience. To be honest, what I said there is nothing that I've not heard from any other member of staff. So I don't think I was talking out of turn there, and I wouldn't have said it had I thought it was out of turn. And I'm not here to defend myself, but had I thought it would be that, and I thought that there was any issue with it, then I would have chose not to wear a helmet camera, because the whole reason why that decision was made, and the decision to wear that camera was my decision, was for clarity. And if somebody chooses to say what I said was consultancy and they beg to differ, then I'm happy to be educated, but I don't think it was. And if I had anything to hide, I wouldn't be wearing a helmet camera.
No, I'm not suggesting that this was some. Well, let's go in light of that answer to the transcript again. Can we look at page 3 of the transcript, please? And you can see from the third entry down on the top of that page, male speaker 4 is actually, and that's Mr. Hayes, is saying, I'm just wondering if you had the same insulation, but the cladding panel itself was something we can't hear. Your response to him is, I don't think the panel itself contributed much from what I've seen. It's just that it distorted. Now, what you're saying here is actually an answer to a question you've been asked by male speaker 4, Mr. Hayes. I know he puts it in terms of a musing or a wondering, but he's saying, well, I'm just wondering, and you're answering him. Isn't that advice?
No, it's passing on the fact of what I'd seen.
Well, he's asking you, well, what would happen if we had the same insulation but did something different with the cladding panel? And your response to him is, I don't think the panel itself actually contributed much. In other words, that change won't make a difference. Is that an unfair way of characterizing that exchange?
When I say the term contributed much, that's a distinction between the fact that the panel itself was burning and carrying the flame up the facade of the build up of the test rig. The thing with that is that the panels were falling to bits in their own right, really, and I don't think I could see that from where they were. So I was passing on information as what I saw in the test, and I don't think, and that was any more than that.
Who was male speaker? Well, who was male speaker 6? Do you know? Did you work it out?
Male speaker 6, was that the gentleman in the blue hat?
Well, I don't know. You help me.
No, I don't know who male speaker 6 is.
Male speaker 6 says, right at the bottom of page 3. Inaudible barrier systems, which 99% of them.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, that's Jonathan Roper.
Right. That's Jonathan Roper.
Yes.
Now, If we go to CEL 30010052, page 12, please. This is the statement of Jonathan Roper to the inquiry. And at that page, I'll wait for it to come up, CEL 30010052. He says this at paragraph 5.29. Following the end of the test, Rob, Ian Cooper, Phil and I had a discussion whilst at the BRE testing centre. Phil said that he had seen worse fails and suggested that Celetex might want to strengthen the outside of the test rig in order to counteract the cracking of the Marley Eternit panels. I told Phil that the Marley Eternit panels were also available in 12mm in addition to the 8mm panels used in the test. Phil responded that he thought that thickening the panels to 12mm might suffice. Phil also joked that Celetex could use a 6mm cement particle board like Kingspan, but I knew that this was not what the business wanted. Now, taking this in stages, if we can, having already seen that you did indeed say that you'd seen worse fails, we've seen that in the transcript and on the video, is Mr. Roper correct that you also had a conversation with him at the burn hall about thickening the Marley Eternit panels?
It's not a conversation I recall, no.
It's a conversation that Mr. Roper recalls. Can you say he's wrong?
I would say I don't recall. I don't know whether he was wrong, but I don't recall it. I definitely, I remember this coming up, and I definitely do not remember joking about the Kingspan 6mm.
I'll come to that in just a moment. Just taking this in small steps. Just in relation to the thickening of the Marley Eternit panel, you say you can't recall, but do you say that Mr. Roper's recollection is faulty?
Yes, I would.
So your evidence is that that conversation didn't happen. Is that right? Or just that you can't recall it?
I can't recall it.
Right. Do you understand there's a difference between saying, I know this didn't happen on the one hand, and saying, I can't remember one way or the other on the other? Oh,
and I understand the difference. Yeah, I could never recall that conversation taking place, no. Right. To a certain extent, I don't even know what thicknesses Marley Eternit panels come in. I don't have enough knowledge of them to say that they do or don't, or whatever thicknesses they're available in. So if that conversation was had, that would have been something coming from Mr. Roper, because as I say, I wouldn't know the thicknesses they're available in.
Well, his recollection is not that you actually cited any thickness of any Marley Eternit panel, only the 6mm cement particle board of Kingspan, which you were familiar with, I think, from your...
No, I wasn't familiar with that, because that was, what, 9 years prior? The only reason he may have known that, but that was 2005. I don't keep knowledge like that in my head.
But the only reason I'm picking you up on this is that the thickness of the Marley Eternit panel information came from him, not you.
Yeah, as in the 6mm and the 12mm.
You can see that from his recollection. I told him that Marley Eternit panels were also available in 12mm.
Right.
Millimeters in the test. So that information came from him, not you. And therefore, the fact that you wouldn't know it is no guide, is it?
I suppose not, no.
No. He goes on to say, as we've just seen, that he says, Phil also joked that Celetex could use a 6mm cement particle board like Kingspan, but I knew this was not what the business wanted. Again, do you recall telling him that you thought that thickening the panels to 12mm might suffice?
I don't recall the conversation, no.
Do you recall joking with him that Celetex could use a 6mm cement particle board like Kingspan?
Definitely don't remember that, no.
Do you recall making even just the gist of the point that they could do a Kingspan or use a cement particle board?
No, because as I said earlier, that test was undertaken in 2005. I'd done numerous projects and numerous other things like that. And for me to remember that it was even a 6mm cement particle board I've got a good memory, but it's not that good.
No, you would remember that it was a cement particle board, though, wouldn't you?
Possibly, yes. Yes, but again, it's not the sort of joke I would make. I think that's too. It's, to me, it's being put in there to bolster an argument that they're making. I think it's put in there to feather their nest, I think.
Well, never mind about that. I'm just asking for your recollection.
I don't recall it, no.
Given that the Marley Eternit was 8mm of cement fiberboard, you wouldn't be advising him, would you, to use a thinner version of the same material if in fact the Kingspan test had been fiberboard?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, I mean, it isn't likely, is it, that given that the Marley Eternit, 8mm of cement fiberboard was fiberboard, you wouldn't be advising him to use a thinner version of the same material. My point is, it's therefore likely that you would have told him to use cement particle board like Kingspan had done.
I wouldn't advise him to make it thinner, no, seeing as it's just failed on a thinner product.
Can we see what Mr. Ripper said in his oral evidence? Transcript day 70, page 73, please. And if we can get a line 2, you can see I think that's the wrong reference, I'm afraid. Page 73, line 2 is not what I want to show you. Perhaps I can come back to that after the break, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the time. It's probably a convenient moment anyway.
Again, say, would you like to take a break now?
That's what I think.
That might be sensible. You can check the reference over the adjournment. Yes?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Okay. All right, Mr. Clark, we're going to have a break now so we can all get some lunch. We'll come back, please, at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
And no talking to anyone about your evidence, please, over the break. All right?
No, I won't. Thank you very much.
Very good. See you at 2 o'clock then.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. 2 o'clock, please.